This is HBR News number 477, Justice for Peanut and Fred. Barbie should get an abortion, where we discuss the news of the week and give it the Badger treatment. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Honey Badger Radio. Well, to the what? Oh yeah, right. Let me start over. Okay. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Honey Badger Radio. Hope you guys are doing well this week and you're laughing at all of this absurdity so that you are not consumed by it. I am your host, Brian. I'm joined, as always, by my lovely co-hosts, Hannah Wallen and Dr. Randercam. On this week's HBR News Show, we're going to be talking about the latest developments regarding the Daniel Penny case. I don't know if you guys remember Daniel Penny. I called him Iron Fist. He was the guy who, well, we'll get into it, but it was a New York case, and a man was stepping up and trying to defend the innocent, and of course, he has got to pay the price for that. Boeing is dismantling their DEI team, Peanut the Squirrel, and more, so stick around. It's going to be a good time, and be sure to join us afterwards for the patron-only show. Not for no reason in particular, we're going to talk about there's some little thing going on right now. I guess today is like a big deal for some reason. Oh, I know why, because it's Guy Fawkes Day. And it is the 5th of November, and we're going to be talking about in the patron show, and maybe some other things that also happen to be falling on this day. Do you guys
celebrate Guy Fawkes Night in the States, or is that still just a British
No,
thing?
That's just a British thing. I only learned about Guy Fawkes Day because of the movie V for Vendetta. So
it's kind of controversial these days because we're supposed to be celebrating Guy Fawkes' failure to blow up the Houses of Parliament. And this comes as a surprise to a lot of us because we're like, what? Really? I thought we were celebrating him at least trying.
Yeah. But yeah, so, remember the 5th of November. We're going to be talking about the 5th of November. In particular, we're going to be talking about election stuff. I'm not even going to pretend. That's obvious. But I'm not going to do it on the main show because everybody's doing that. So I thought, let's try to find some different topics. But if you want to join us for that conversation, please consider becoming a Badger yourself by going to feedthebadger.com and setting up a monthly subscription. $5 a month will get you into our Discord server where you'll be able to essentially, consume all of the additional content and be a part of the community. There's lots of stuff going on there all the time. And there'll probably be people watching various live streams, maybe even appearing on them. I was going to ask you that, Mike, before we started. You made an appearance on the Lotus Eaters when the English elections came. Are you going to be making an appearance on tonight's?
No.
No? Okay.
I'm not their resident composer this time. So
I see.
They've
Okay.
got a load of famous people on.
Yeah, they're super huge now. but anyway, I am grateful for you, Mike. I do. I appreciate you. I think you're the best, and I'm glad that you're here with us. So who cares? We don't need them anyway.
You don't need any of the dozens of streaming of people who are streaming.
Yeah,
so I'm surprised we've got 27 people watching at this point.
I am surprised by that. I know that usually the news show is pretty big, but there's so much else going on. But hey, maybe we can help you understand where the threads are that other people will not, and that's kind of what I want to talk about in the patron show. What does this have to do with men? Well, I'm glad you asked, but I'm not going to tell you now. So we'll talk about it then. So if you want to join us, again, that's feedthebadger.com/subscribe. And if you just want to check out what the Discord is like, you can go to the free version by going to badgernation.online. And if you don't want to wake up one morning to find that we've been yeeted from the mainstream internet, then look for our archive content on honeybadgerradio.com. Or what is the other one called? Badgerfeed.com. Badgerfeed.com. All right. So anyway, with all that said, let us get into today's stories. We're going to open up with a follow-up on Daniel Penny. And let's talk about that really quick here. Let me just, where did I put it? Here we go. Okay. So we have just done jury selection for the trial of Daniel Penny. Daniel Penny is accused of causing Jordan Neely, who was a man on the subway that was apparently threatening people, according to witnesses. And Daniel Penny put him in a chokehold and he died on a New York City subway. The process involves questioning jurors about their experience with subway travel and encounters with erratic behavior on public transit. The details of the trial: Penny Chase faces charges of second-degree manslaughter and criminally negligent homicide. The trial is expected to last 6 weeks, with opening statements highlighting the defense's assertion that Penny was defending himself and others, while the prosecution claims he went too far by not releasing Neely even after he was no longer moving. It's also worth pointing out that one of the reasons why Neely did die, from the chokehold, had to do with the fact that the police response time was much higher than it usually was because the police had been defunded, and so there are fewer of them to actually do their job. So there's like there are compounding factors that led to this unfortunate outcome. The public reaction has sparked significant discourse, with some viewing Penny's actions as protective, rather. This includes people who are on the train. Some of them hopefully will be witnesses in the case, while others will see it as an overstep into vigilantism, raising issues of race, mental health, and societal response to homelessness. For the manslaughter conviction, the prosecution must prove that Penny recklessly caused Neely's death while being aware of the risk of serious harm. The jury will be anonymous due to threats received by all parties involved. So let me just finish reading this out, and then I want to add a little bit extra that makes this kind of an interesting case worth talking about. But let me just finish this. So, video evidence from the incident is central to the case, with the prosecution arguing it shows Penny's unnecessary prolonged use of the chokehold. This is according to the prosecution, while the defense might challenge the cause of death and Neely's behavior prior to the restraint, which was threatening the people on the train. Juror composition: the jury pool will largely consist of individuals with some experience riding the subway, many of whom have witnessed or experienced some form of disturbance or harassment on the train, which could influence their perspective on the case. So this is going to be, it sounds a lot like the trial of Derek Chauvin when George Floyd passed away, while Chauvin was restraining him. And the meaning is that there is an assumption that Penny is going to be essentially the jury of his peers is going to be making the call. But there's so much publicity and noise around it that there is a pretty good chance that, in the same way, because there's a really good documentary about the George Floyd case that shows you that the jury was either biased against Chauvin based on the coverage, which they could not avoid, even though the judge said, don't watch any TV. It was there was no way you could avoid talking about it or getting exposed to some of it. Or they felt threatened by not, going with a guilty verdict because of the environment around the courthouse. And there's some cause to believe that this same thing is happening here. Jury selection just happened, and according to ABC for New York, most of the roughly 20 potential panelists who underwent questioning on Friday were at least occasional subway riders, and many said they've seen people have outbursts. Some said the episodes hadn't left them feeling personally threatened or harassed, but several said that they had. So there is a chance that he might have some jury members that do understand the subway and have ridden it themselves, and so they know what the environment is like. But that might do him a bit of a favor, because again, yeah, go ahead, Mike.
It's a weird kind of expertise to have traveled on the subway. Haven't millions of New Yorkers at some point traveled on the subway?
If you live in, say, Manhattan or upstate, or you're not in the city proper, or you're in a nice part of the city and you don't travel much, everything is around where you are, or you're relatively shielded from everything. Which is possible to live in a bubble I know Chicago has bubbles like that as well. People who live on the Gold Coast or, near the universities, for example, they're going to have a different experience than the people who live in the projects or have to pass through them. There's like Chicago is notorious for its red line train, which goes from the north end of the city to the south end of the city in basically a straight line. But once you go south past Chinatown, the entire environment changes drastically. So if you don't ride the train outside of downtown and you don't go far south, then you're going to have presumptions about what the experience is like versus people who do go on the south side. And I think that I've never been to New York, but I think that it's possible that there's something similar there. But anyway, so this is the stage of this that we're at. I wanted to mention this story because this guy, and this is the last thing I'll say about it, and I'll let you guys take over. Remember what caused this. He was on a train. I think he was ex-military or something, like a veteran. And there was a man on the train who was threatening people and getting in their face and acting erratic. And people were very concerned. And we're talking about women and elderly people that were on the train, and they felt threatened by this guy. And Penny, stepped in to try to control the situation or take down the temperature. Ended up, putting himself in this physical altercation, which of course it turned out that he was able to handle himself, but there was no way of knowing he could have been hurt in this instance by this person, but that's not what happened. And then he puts the guy in a chokehold. Some people are calling the police. They don't come for several minutes. The man dies in custody. The cops come and they arrest him. And, this is, I think that the takeaway from most people when this was happening was that this is how men are rewarded for essentially, stepping up and protecting the people who are weaker and more innocent. And it does kind of feel that way because Penny is being framed as a racist, and that he just one day decided to kill a black guy on the train because he felt like it, I guess. And so, I just want to push back on those narratives. So anyway, anyone else who wants this, and he might go to jail. They might just convict him. The jury might just say, yeah, there's a lot of this that happens. So, but I'll let you guys go if you want.
Mike, you go first.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, and I could be wrong because I heard about this on X, formerly Twitter. But apparently, it's been determined along some legal lines that Jordan Neely was still alive by the time he was in police custody, and it was only shortly afterwards when he died. Now, I'm not sure what this proves or does not prove, but it's an interesting development. It's possible that Neely died from a delayed reaction of lack of oxygen to the brain or whatever. I suppose that would make sense, but it does open up the possibility that there were other factors at play other than the chokehold into which Daniel Penny put him. And yet it does sound rather familiar, doesn't it? As in rather reminiscent of that other death in police custody that was thought to be a result of a physical obstruction of the airwaves of oxygen to the brain, but turned out, according to the toxicology report, to be far more likely resultant of, well, toxicology. And even though we were all furnished with George Floyd's post-mortem, most people didn't take heed of it. Indeed, they weren't even privy to it, especially not the race-baiting media, and for some reason not the jury in the trial of Derek Chauvin. You would think it would be an open and shut case if the jury was shown the details along the lines of no evidence of respiratory obstruction, ... 4 times the lethal dose of fentanyl plus methamphetamine and so on. This is where I have to show my ignorance, since I haven't made the effort to look it up. But where, pray tell, is Jordan Neely's post-mortem report, especially the toxicology section? Is it possible that his erratic behavior that day could have been a result of a chemical imbalance? Perhaps the very same chemical imbalance that could be the primary or at least secondary cause of death. Chokeholds don't normally kill people. Just like kneeling on someone's shoulder doesn't normally kill people. It's actually extremely rare, but it's more likely to be a contributing factor to a death if the patient in question is already on a potentially deadly cocktail of drugs. And don't get me wrong, whenever someone's erratic behavior filmed in public is knee-jerk attributed to, oh, they must be on something, like, I'll be the first to respond, yeah, no, not necessarily. Sober people are perfectly capable of being irrational dickheads on account of being taught to be that way from an early age. I mean, children are irrational dickheads, and some adults have simply never been trained out of that compulsion to be irrational dickheads, largely because they get participation trophies no matter what, and especially if they are pampered as a protected group. Indeed, adherents of a certain religion, a religion that forbids them from becoming intoxicated, can be very prone to stabbing random children in the street or decapitating random soldiers in the street. So, in any given case, yes, it might be drugs, but it might also, or instead, be the result of indoctrination into a broken education system. Such cases are far more common than cases of any given drug intoxication. But we're not just talking about erratic behavior. We're talking about spontaneous death. Miseducation, for all its faults and all its ubiquity, does not cause spontaneous death in those afflicted with it. Drugs do. Certain drugs, anyway. Is there any chance at all that what we're looking at here is yet another fentanyl death, just like the thousands of fentanyl deaths happening all over the place all the time? I'm just asking questions. Again, I apologize for my ignorance. I have not seen Mr. Neely's toxicology report. All it would take to debunk my questions is to show me that report. If anyone can do so, I'll be very grateful. But I'm sure you can understand my apprehension, since Derek Chauvin is in prison to this day, constantly fearing for his life, on account of this small detail not being made apparent. I really don't want Daniel Penny suffering the same fate. Because if police officers can't defend the public from criminals, and neither can well-meaning members of the public, then frankly we're fucked. I mean, frankly, we're already fucked. I guess we'll find out by approximately tomorrow morning just how fucked we're going to be for the next 4 years at least. Either way, it's going to be a while before we're completely unfucked, because as it stands right now, we are completely fucked. In the meantime, if you happen to be on a subway when something shady goes down, I say nothing, gentlemen. Do nothing. Run away as far as you can, as quickly as you can. It is not worth it. When the system is not worth saving, there's nothing you can do but save yourself from the system. You are still valuable, even when the system is not. These bitches will not even thank you for looking after them. So look after yourselves, brothers. And if it's not too late, vote Trump. They tried to kill him.
And also in regard to these bitches, it's their fault. And I have a long rant. I'll try to condense it, but it'll explain why it's their fault. So we talked on HBR Talk recently about how the burgeoning blob that everybody talks about, that I think is more like the carnivorous plant from the Little Shop of Horrors. Yeah,
feed me, Seymour.
I think that bureaucracy can be squarely placed at women's doorstep, right? So that's the first thing you have to understand. When I talk about the bureaucracy and what the bureaucracy does, I am blaming women. Because women voted that bureaucracy into place everywhere that it exists, whether it's at the federal level, the state level, the county level, the city level, even the neighborhood level, when there are like homeowner groups and stuff that make rules for your neighborhood, whether you like it or not. All of that is voted into place or pushed into place, socially manipulated into place by women in the name of safety that never comes from it. Okay? So that's the first thing to keep in mind. Here's the second thing to keep in mind. Feminists fought tooth and nail during the 60s and the 70s to end the practice of of involuntarily committing people who appeared to be a danger to themselves or other people. They fought really hard for that on the basis that only husbands do it to only wives. What ended up happening was, after the 70s, like right before the Reagan administration, a bunch of institutions that had people in them getting help for serious mental health conditions ended up having to release people who needed help. And the homeless population exploded. And this is why the majority of homeless right now are mentally ill. Because it is much harder to get someone help when they very obviously need it. And they didn't create a balance where people's freedoms were protected, but their health and safety and the health and safety of the people around them was also protected. They simply released people from mental health institutions that needed to be institutionalized, needed treatment, needed medication. And granted, in the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, treatment and medication were still evolving. They were not great. They were the part of the reason that it was so easy for gender dysphoria, for instance, to be treated with Frankenstein surgery is because the mental health profession was kind of the duct tape and bale wire end of the medical profession at that point. You had things like zombie drugs and getting iced down as treatment for mental health, and there was a lot of abuse that took place, and there was abuse of the system. But rather than just reforming abuse of the system, they tore the whole thing down. They made it damn near impossible for families to get help for people in their family that had severe mental health conditions, severe substance abuse problems, criminal behavior that was cropping up. Even the state has difficulty with that. And it's been to the detriment of people with mental health conditions. So that's the second thing, and that's women's fault, again. Rather than actually trying to figure out a balance in the system where people who really need help can get help, even if they are so in need of it that they cannot see their need, which happens with drug addiction, and it happens with some severe mental illness, especially if that mental illness involves inability to parse your perceptions of reality, which, of course, feminists do not like the idea that women might be accused of that, even though it happens with men as well. Right. So those two things, those two factors existed. Like, this is the environment that this happened in. It was those two factors have existed for decades. They've been a problem for decades. They've been growing for decades. And the bureaucracy that deals with these issues in big cities, that deals with these issues at the state level, that deals with these issues at the federal level, has done nothing to improve it. They've made all kinds of changes, but they've done nothing to actually improve the situation. Right? So there's that. Right? So we know from various news stories that Mr. Neely had multiple run-ins with police. He had mental health issues that had come out during these run-ins with police. At one point, or more, he told police that the reason that he did something that caused a run-in with them was that he was schizophrenic and he was off his meds. So this is a man who needed help. and he wasn't getting all of the help he needed, because sometimes he was ending up in trouble with the police due to behavior that occurred because he was not taking his meds. Right? That's a serious problem. And when that's a woman, people have compassion. People try to help. People try to do what they can to ensure that she is not going to come to any harm, right? But when that's a man, people don't have the same degree of concern for him, whether it's the public or the people who are the cogs and wheels in the system, even their own families. A lot of times, people's first response is to protect themselves. And partly it's because when men are violent, people have an easier time recognizing that they're dangerous than they do when women are violent. People don't always recognize that violent women can be dangerous. And I mean, I've been guilty of that. I have permanent injuries from an assault that happened in 2019 because I didn't accept how dangerous the woman was that was attacking me. So people can recognize the danger inherent in violence when it's a man doing it, right? And that combination affected this situation very dramatically. And of course, then there's also women demanding vigilante violence from men. And I've said this before, and I will say it again. You don't owe women that. You do not owe anybody that. That is not your job. You are not obligated. It is not immoral or unethical for you to have concern for your own personal safety and the potential consequences of any actions that you might take, especially in today's environment where you can get condemned for stopping someone from trying to harm other people. And that's basically what happened here. What happened with Jordan Neely shouldn't have happened because he should not have been in a position to have that breakdown in that location with no assistance coming. Women had voted to defund police. Women had headed a movement to defund police. Women had created a situation that caused a homelessness explosion among the mentally ill. Women had created a situation in which men who behave erratically are viewed as more dangerous than maybe they were or are. And women have created a situation in which men feel obligated to protect everyone around them when somebody feels unsafe. And then women condemned Daniel Penny for doing what he was taught was the right thing to do. So there's no win here as far as what action you can take in a situation like this. You could protect everybody on the train and still be condemned for doing the wrong thing because in the process of stopping the violent person from doing harm to other people, you did harm to him. And nobody will recognize that the entire situation could have been prevented by tearing down bureaucracy and addressing human issues as human beings trying to help other human beings. Right? So this isn't just about Daniel Penny. Yes, the way he's being treated is wrong. No, it's not just because of this individual situation. You might as well not step in. You might as well, if you're going to get condemned for something, at least you won't go to jail for not stepping in. At least you won't go to the hospital with broken bones or stab wounds or bite wounds or any other type of suffering, pain and suffering that you experience because you didn't confront a violent person on other people's behalf. If you're going to be condemned for something, it's better to be condemned for something that didn't cause you personal physical risk and didn't cause you risk of legal issues. And if women get upset about that, they can be reminded that they created this monster. They created the environment in which it's happening. They created the response to men stepping in, and they have no business complaining when men respond to that environment and to that response by choosing not to step in. Because it's their fault. And the only other thing that I will point out here is the police didn't just take a long time to get there. They also refused to provide Mr. Neely with CPR. And they did it because, to quote a particular news story, Sergeant Johnson testified that none of his team performed mouth-to-mouth on Neely because he was a drug user. He seemed to be a drug user. He was an apparent drug user. He was very dirty. I didn't want them to get hepatitis, Johnson said. So now, I'm not going to say that people are obligated to take risks to prevent death either. Like, the police are not obligated if they are afraid that you're going to give them a disease. I'm not going to say they're obligated to risk exposure. But if they don't perform CPR, then is it really the fault of Daniel Penny that this man died? Because CPR could have brought him back. And it's something that should be usable in court to obtain an acquittal. Now, I, on the other hand, if I was in a situation like that, actually carry a mask with me that assists with CPR. And by the way, there's something else that you should know about CPR. You can do chest compressions without doing rescue breaths. And if there is any oxygen in the blood, it will keep it flowing. Now, Gabriel Phelan Lucas says it is technically illegal for civilians not to intervene in some countries. I'd be interested in seeing that law. Are women obligated to intervene, and are they obligated to risk their own lives to do so? And if they are, can they then be prosecuted if their intervention leads to injury or death? Because if that is not the case, then somebody needs to start suing for discrimination if women aren't equally obligated and equally at risk under that circumstance. If that only applies to men, that's discrimination.
It was,
but
the hue and cry thing was in force in Britain for a long time. From medieval times right up until fairly recently. If the hue and cry thing was, if a crime is discovered, then someone goes, help, you all have to help, and that means every able-bodied man is legally obliged to come and help, and if they don't, then it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation, right up until the modern day, as Daniel Penny is a testament to.
And see, I could see if you saw something happen and you didn't call 911, that would be one thing. But if you see something happening and you don't put yourself at personal risk to intervene, that should be a different story. You know, we have a whole political movement around the world by women that uses exemption from obligation to even to just not intervene in order to protect life. Like they don't feel obligated to not intervene in order to protect life if failure to intervene puts themselves at risk. So, for instance, if a woman can claim that because 71 out of 300,000 women die at some point between conception and the first year after childbirth, she feels endangered, she feels unsafe being pregnant. They want that to be a basis for allowing her to kill her baby before birth. Some of them even after birth. But they want men to have to intervene. on behalf of women at their own risk. And not just risk of physical danger, but also risk of being condemned as the bad guy for stopping the violence. So I go back to the video I made in response to the song "Wait in the Truck," and I think it was called "We Have to Talk About Scare Quotes Male Violence," because
Yeah.
I don't believe there's such a thing as male violence. There's violence, men and women both do it. There's a different reaction when men do it than there is when women do it, but it doesn't make that violence male. It's still just violence, right? But that video, I made the point that you're not obligated to be society's bodyguards, not morally. Women have lost that, if it ever existed, as a real moral obligation. Not a legal obligation, but a moral obligation, right? That moral obligation has been murdered by the feminist movement.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And you shouldn't treat yourself and the people around you as if you owe anyone that debt. Because there is no good at this point that comes from paying it.
Yeah,
And that is entirely women's fault. Entirely.
Do remember this, folks, whenever you see a video of either a candid camera or someone's mobile video of some crime taking place where some fucking monkey mugs someone or beats someone up, and there's a white man 10 feet away who doesn't do anything or even like flees the scene. Your compulsion is to say, this is what's wrong with society. Men don't do anything when this shit happens. Like, don't fucking listen to them. The worst thing that can happen is you might go viral on the internet, and for a few days people will say, you are to blame for these fucking monkeys mugging and raping and killing everyone. But then that'll go away for a while, and then it'll be back to normal. That's much better than you running in and getting stabbed and no one even thanking you for your efforts. Like, there's I was gonna say there's no shame in running the fuck away, but there is. That's the problem with being male. You're shamed if you do, shamed if you don't, but shame is better than getting shanked. So
that's true.
Just get shamed. Don't get shanked. There you go.
Good advice, Mike.
Something else that needs to be pointed out real quick. There have been times when men have intervened when they thought a crime was being committed against the woman and the woman was the criminal. And there have been some of those times when that woman was trying to kidnap a baby away from a father. So bear in mind, if you didn't see the start of the situation and you don't know what happens, you are doubly advised to avoid getting yourself involved in the situation. Call the cops. Let them deal with it. They get paid for that. You don't.
All right. Well, I got a super chow from Meredith G for $5, and she says, "Honey for the Badger." Thank you, Meredith, the top G, and that's it so far. But let us know what you guys think about this one in the comments. We're gonna move on to the next story, and I look forward to your thoughts on the Daniel Penny situation as it evolves, I suppose. All right, next up, Boeing. I think this is interesting and good news if you like flying on planes. Boeing Company has dismantled its Global Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Department, which, I mean, when you're, again, planes, this is serious business, integrating its staff into another human resources team focused on talent and employee experience. What a mind-blowing concept. This move is part of a broader overhaul of its workforce under the new leadership of CEO Kelly Ortberg. Here are some of the key points. So first, there was a leadership change. The decision came as Boeing undergoes a leadership transition, with Kelly Ortberg taking over as CEO, who has been focusing on streamlining operations and reducing executive ranks. This is like reducing bloat and wastefulness. This includes a planned 10% reduction in headcount. DEI department, which was previously led by Vice President Sarah Liang Bowen, has been dissolved. Bowen announced her departure from Boeing on LinkedIn, expressing pride in the work done by her team. Response to the external pressure, the change follows increasing pressure from activists and public figures like Elon Musk, who have criticized corporate DEI initiatives, especially in relation to quality and safety issues at Boeing. This pressure has influenced several large U.S. companies to either dismantle or downplay their DEI efforts. Boeing had committed to increasing their diversity, particularly in response to societal events like the death of George Floyd in 2020. Yes, that's where the DEI shit comes from. Basically, everywhere, ever since that and the Me Too movement, there have been all of these sort of pushes in various industries and institutions to change the demographics. Aiming for a 20% increase in black employment by 2025. Despite this, the company's actions now suggest a shift in strategy, although they maintain a commitment to an inclusive work environment for recruiting and retaining top talent.
2025, you say? Whoa. That's the kind of evil project I've heard.
Yeah, I've heard that. The overhaul at Boeing reflects a broader corporate trend. So yeah, this is not only happening at Boeing, it's happening in other places, although let's say with a lot of resistance. This move has sparked discussions regarding the future of corporate diversity initiatives. The balance, supposedly, there's an attempt to strike a balance between diversity efforts and core business functions like engineering and safety. And how companies will respond to both internal strategic needs and external political pressures. So that's Boeing is reversing course. I wonder what it took for that. But anyway.
This is all well and good. Are we going to get an apology for all the dead whistleblowers at any point? Or at least an acknowledgement of the existence of these whistleblowers?
Guys, this is not what it looks like.
Can you at least do us the traditional courtesy of gaslighting us along the lines of, yeah, no, it's just a coincidence. Like, can anyone explain to us what was the point in the first place of the DEI policy? Were your planes falling apart because you weren't hiring enough black, lesbian, disabled, Islamic other kid? Your planes weren't falling apart. Everything was going just fine until you started discriminating against straight, white, able-bodied Christian men. And you didn't have to kill any whistleblowers because there weren't any whistles to even blow. How weird. How very, very weird. Will there be any consequences for this fucking scandal? Tragically enough, no, because Boeing had already cornered the market. If Boeing were prosecuted into oblivion, there wouldn't be anyone left to manufacture commercial aircraft, maybe Airbuses or whatever. So it's frankly miraculous that they were ever held to account. The only reason they were ever able to incorporate these backward-ass communist hiring policies is because they had already cornered the aforementioned market. Go woke, go broke is indeed a fallacious concept, as we keep discovering in as many industries as it can infect. It's only true for small businesses.
I enjoy fallatio. You said fallacious.
There's something that you guys don't understand about this news story. Right? This is a non-story. Right? They have changed absolutely nothing. Okay? The first paragraph tells us that. Integrating staff into another human resources team focused on talent and employee experience. The staff from the DEI team is now just on the HR team. All right. Probably the staff from the DEI team came from the HR team. This is something that these companies have been doing. They have been doing this since the 80s, at least, possibly the 70s. What is today known as DEI has previously been known as social justice, political correctness, a whole bunch of other names, anti-discrimination, affirmative action. It's all the same thing. All of these policies still exist. All of these policies are still in place. They rename, rebrand, sort of play musical chairs and where people are seated at the political correctness table, at the PC culture table, and they continue doing the same shit they were doing before, and they're gonna do it now. I really hate to quash a white pill, but this doesn't deserve celebration until we see people bitching about actual policy change that is actually stopping discrimination against white people. Because it hasn't happened in the last 30 or 40 years that that these people change anything that they're doing when they say they're changing what they're doing. And I hate being the doomsayer here. It's good that it's not popular among the public. It's good that the public doesn't want this, but the public hasn't really wanted this. The public hasn't been united in wanting this ever. And yet it's been there for almost our whole lives as part of Generation X. And if you're a millennial, it has been there for your whole life. You've never worked in an environment that did not have this going on. Every millennial, every Zoomer in the workplace, this has affected your experience of hiring and promotion. This has affected how you do business with these companies. And it will continue to affect how you do business with these companies as long as they are able to rearrange, rebrand, renew, and sidestep accountability for this shit. So until we, the public, turn around and say, we don't believe you, and we're not fooled by this. Fix it. Stop doing this. Fire the people that you had involved in these teams and create an explicit policy that completely forbids any use of any demographic details as a reason to hire or promote somebody. And then show us that you are following it and how you are following it. Until we do that, the beatings will continue until morale looks like it has improved. Because that's the way this has worked for all this time. It's a scam. You have to watch out for this scam.
Yeah, HR departments are mostly an artifact of large businesses. Small businesses can't afford that shit. They can't afford the liability of hiring and firing people based on skin color or genitals or an identified reimagining of genitals, because they are at all times one fuck up away from total disaster from which they can't possibly financially recover. And they don't have the money or resources to murder their whistleblowers and get away with it. Like, McDonald's can kill as many people as they like, allegedly, but mom and pop's burger shop cannot. What is called DEI is nothing but a weapon of the establishment to use against the unestablished. The irony is as thick as clotted tungsten, isn't it? The so-called progressives who proclaim to want to close the gap between the rich and the poor will enact policies that only favor the rich in detriment to the poor. Many such cases. Why are people so stupid? Why? It's because they hate their own kind. It's because rich communist cunts have convinced them that hating their own kind is the right thing to do. Like, I don't hate rich people. I don't hate large corporations, and I don't hate stupid people. Well, all right, I do kind of hate stupid people. Why wouldn't I? But the problem is how easy it is for rich authoritarians to manipulate stupid authoritarians. And I don't know how we sever that connection. I wish I did, because that connection seems to be largely the source of all our problems. Stupid people will never unstupid themselves because megalomaniacal psychopaths are so effortlessly able to recruit them into their army of zombies, banging their heads in the sand until their heads are well and truly buried in that sand. Sorry to say it again, but I think democracy is the problem. I think what I described as the connection between rich psychopaths and stupid psychopaths can indeed be simplified into what we call democracy. The best way to get people to go along with an insane idea is to convince them that it's their idea, that it's their fault, that it's their problem. If you give people the illusion of power, you can give them the illusion that your power is actually their power, and you can punch them in the face over and over again and genuinely convince them that they are indeed punching themselves in the face, and that the only way out of this situation is to punch even harder in whatever direction you feel like you might be punching. I just can't. You can see why the problem seems so insurmountable. It's like being a domesticated animal. It would be nice if we could truly live in the wild and look after ourselves, but we've been trapped in this sensory bubble for so long that it's hard to imagine how we would ever manage ourselves outside it. I like to think it's not too late, but I worry that at best we are at the cusp of the point where it's already too late. If it's not too late, folks, vote Donald Trump. It's not he who will lead us out of the bubble, but it's certainly his opponents who will lead us inexorably into that bubble's event horizon. The journey back to nature will not be easy, but it's far better than the alternative. So yeah, return to monkey.
Honestly, I think
as soon and as quickly as possible. Ook, I say, and furthermore, bois. I think that's how monkeys talk.
I think the journey back, people getting an understanding of the malice and threat level of authoritarianism might actually start with a squirrel.
Good segue.
So that's a good segue, yeah. Yeah, so we're gonna move on to the next thing. I don't disagree with anything you guys said. I mean, when like you said, it was in the first paragraph, and this is usually how it goes. You know, like you get caught doing something, so you say we're gonna change everything, and then you just sort of move the furniture around and repaint the inside and get new curtains, and then reopen for business. So yeah, that's just sort of like the way it normally goes. But I did get a super chow from Meredith G, who gave us $5 and says, Hannah is correct. Corporate America isn't getting rid of DEI. I know the company I work for had hiring expectations for women and minorities as part of performance evaluations in the 1990s. Yes, DEI is very old. It's just, you know what? It's exactly the same as when the Supreme Court made the ruling about affirmative action in colleges, right? And I think that we covered that. I know that I've talked about it and that it doesn't change anything. They're just going to engage in the same practices and then act like they're doing it based on merit and just say it's merit and not because of some, initiative or policy. And they're just going to do it naturally because it's what they want. And I think it's the same thing here. They can just internally virtue signal and maybe not externally virtue signal. So, but anyway, let us know what you guys think about this one in the comments. We're going to move on to the next one. We're going to talk about the friend that we didn't know we had, Peanut the Squirrel. So, internet famous gray squirrel and mascot of the New York-based animal sanctuary and rescue operation known as Peanut's Freedom Farm was killed last week by New York State's Department of Environmental Conservation. Peanut the Squirrel was taken in by animal rehabber Mark Longo after he was discovered as an orphan. Peanut was successfully raised by Longo and became the mascot of his Instagram page as well as his pet. Due to being raised in captivity, Peanut was not able to be returned into the wild. But due to numerous anonymous complaints to the Department of Environmental Conservation, a SWAT-style raid was carried out on Longo's property. During that time, Peanut the squirrel had Fred the raccoon. Yeah, there was also a raccoon in the story. Were both seized as possible rabies vector species. During the chaos, Peanut allegedly bit one of the officers. Both animals were put down in order to test for rabies. Note that there is no way to test for rabies on a live animal, as the testing requires brain samples to be taken. This gross violation has left Longo shaken with grief. Taking to Instagram, Longo wrote, quote, "To the group of people who call DEC, there's a special place in hell for you," end quote. The internet has been set ablaze by this news, with commenters sympathizing with Longo and his loss, and others demanding to know who okayed this vulgar misuse of government resources. All right, I'll let you guys go ahead, Mike.
So I'm gonna point something out. First of all, because I've handled squirrels, and I grew up in a little rural community, and the first squirrel that we ever fed and treated as sort of a pseudo pet. He was still wild and everything. We named him Peanut. So this story kind of hit home for a weird reason, because it reminds me of my dad. Dad's the one that named him. But squirrels are not the animal that, first of all, that you're most likely to get rabies from. It's bats.
They can't even get it.
They can get them.
Get rabies.
Yes, they can. They can. Everything can get rabies. It's rabies is very prolific. It's very weird. We have treatments and vaccines for all kinds of other viruses, but nobody thought rabies was dangerous enough to do that with. But that's not the point I'm going to make. The point I'm going to make here is there was never a really valid and good reason for anybody to report this, and there was certainly never a good reason for a SWAT-style raid to be carried out. Squirrels aren't like dogs. They're not aggressive. They will run away from you. They don't attack. Right? That's the first thing. So if you want to get attacked by a squirrel, you have to grab it. You have to scare it, and you have to cut off its escape. And somebody had to have done that in order to get bitten. So this is a situation where government officials engaging in massive overreach deliberately created a situation in an animal refuge where the squirrel ended up supposedly justifying his own execution. They deliberately set off a wild animal and then killed it, and they did it to punish the guy who was being kind to the animal, to hurt him. They didn't do this because of the animals. They didn't do this because the animals were a threat to anybody. They didn't do this because the animals were being mishandled or mistreated. They did it to punish this guy for being nice to the squirrel. They did it to punish this guy for showing the world that he was being nice to the squirrel. That's why they did it. And for me, when I look at this, this isn't a story about a squirrel and a raccoon. It's a story about massive government overreach. It's a story about a Nurse Ratched type of government official. And it's a story about people being so caught up in bureaucratic bullshit and so devoid of compassion and consideration for the man whose property they stole and destroyed, that they ordered and carried out the seizure and execution of someone's handicapped pet just to hurt the guy who owned him for making his care public. And it's not a new thing either. I've told you guys that I've worked in journalism. I've been a photojournalist. I've been a writer. Mostly a photojournalist up until I got involved with the men's rights movement, right? But my high school newspaper teacher, who I I knew from the time I was a little kid because he was friends with my dad. I was friends with his daughter. So I was over at his house all the time. My dad was at his house all the time, and I would get to hear them talking all the time. Told this story, okay, of one time when the government was called on a farmer. Farmer had cows, milk cows or beef cows, cattle. I'm not sure what, but he had cattle that he was feeding, and every day on his farm, right, with big feeding troughs. And a deer came along and started eating out of the feeding troughs. And he tried everything to chase this deer off because the feed was for his property that he was going to, sell as a product or sell milk from them as a product. And he could not get rid of it. It wouldn't leave. And it wasn't actually doing any harm. It wasn't showing any signs of sickness. It wasn't showing any signs of being a danger. Like, the worst thing with deer is that they might have some sort of parasite or microbe, pathogen that could possibly transfer to other animals. And that didn't seem to be a problem. So he finally just decided to ignore the damn thing, right? Somebody calls the government. My understanding, it was the EPA that they called. I doubt the EPA is who showed up, but government officials did show up and chased the deer around. They first accused the farmer of keeping it captive, and he had to disabuse them of the notion that it was actually, he considered the deer his property or anything like that. He's like, have at it. I couldn't catch him. I couldn't stop him. You guys, it's up to you. If you want to take him, take him. And so they did. They chased him all day in somewhat the manner of Inspector Clouseau chasing the Pink Panther, because obviously the deer was not too keen on being seized by a bunch of weird-looking human predatory animals in hazmat suits to protect them from deer ticks are dangerous. Like, anybody that lives in any Midwestern state knows that, right? So they chased this thing all day. And yeah, Yakety Sax, Richard Bierre, Yakety Sax would have been the perfect song for this, because that's what it looked like. It looked like a sketch out of Benny Hill, with this stupid animal, terrified, just absolutely terrified of these government officials, and running and hiding and everything. And they finally caught it, put it in the truck. They finally, they believed themselves to be protecting this animal, remember, from the farmer, right? So they put it in the truck. Animal has a heart attack and dies. They did a fabulous job. They protected it to death. Government overreach, right? That's the situation we're dealing with. And what people are considering and concerned about in regard to this squirrel. Yeah, it's easy to rally around a cute little animal, right? Squirrels are adorable. They're basically just fucking little tree rats with good PR, but they're adorable. And, I adored them when I was a little kid. You couldn't pay me to get near one today because I don't want fleas. But yeah, people rally around that. But it's not the deer. It's not the squirrel. It's not the raccoon. It's not the cute, fuzzy little animal. All right? It's the Feed Me Seymour plant. It's the government bureaucracy. It's the fact that when you have a thumbtack that they think needs to be moved a little to the left or to the right, they don't have a procedure from that. They don't have any way to handle that but to bring in a big, fat, 20-pound sledge and start pounding away to make it fit. Peanut the squirrel is not a symbol of anything. What was done to Peanut the squirrel, and in particular, what was done to Mark Longo for the crime of being nice to Peanut the squirrel, is a symbol of the bureaucratic mind virus. Right? And the woke mind virus that everybody has been talking about, That is a symptom, a manifestation of the bureaucratic mind virus. That's it. We've talked about the bureaucratic mind virus before. I think it's been 5 years. It was before COVID, I'm pretty sure, that we actually did the episode on the bureaucratic mind virus and how it affects the way bureaucrats think. Because they literally cannot deviate from what's on their forms and what's in their policies. If something doesn't fall into a specific category, a specific place, if it's outside the lines, they will hammer it, they will shoot it, they will cut it off, they will do anything they can to either make it fit or make it go away because they don't know how to handle it and they don't care. And if you think they'll stop at your pets or your property, wait until they decide that your children are outside the lines or your parenting is outside the lines, because that's happening to people already. There are people whose children have been kidnapped by the government because the parents sought second opinions after a medical doctor stated that a child should or should not have a particular treatment. And I'm not even just talking about, blatant, obvious stuff like the gender treatment. I'm talking about kids who are being subjected to other types of surgery, who are being drugged against their will and their parents' will, who are being subjected to or taken off of cancer treatment against their parents' will and against their will when they are dying or when they are not in need of that treatment. Like, it's quite horrifying what is actually happening in the country today. There are people who have lost custody of their children because the other parent disagrees with their parenting style in a way that doesn't touch on any actual legal issue. There was a parent in Florida that was forced under threat of jail to sign a consent form for her son to be circumcised against her will, because the judge thought it would be healthier for him. Not because a doctor ordered it and the child was going to have some sort of consequence if it didn't happen, but because a judge decided, a judge who was not a doctor, decided that he liked the information presented in favor more than he liked the information presented against. So, yeah, you guys can... There are people I've been seeing, oh, I don't care about a stupid squirrel. I don't care about a stupid squirrel. Forget the squirrel. Look at the government action and recognize this is bad, not because a squirrel died, but because your freedom did. Because your individuality did. Because your civil rights did. That's what you should be upset about, and that's why you should be scared. Fuck the squirrel. Not literally, because that would be really dangerous, but who cares what the reason was that they did this? That they did this should be enough.
Agreed. And to fold this in on itself, given that this kind of thing probably happens all the time, non-kosher pets being killed, or whatever, given that this wouldn't ordinarily be a story unless it was in the lead up to an election, it all seems a little bit sus to me in a number of dimensions, a little bit opportunistic. I mean, call me a cynic. Go on, call me a cynic.
You
Is there something wrong
cynic.
with being a cynic?
You're correct. I'm a cynic. Call me the kind of recursively black-pilled doomer who thinks everything is a psyop, but this looks like a psyop. It seems like something of a distraction from more important issues like, policies. It seems like some hokey bullshit that people are laughing about. It feels like we're the dog from Up. Everybody be sure to get out there and vote for the one who Squirrel. And yes, I realize it's not just about the squirrel. It's about how they'll raid a house for a squirrel, and so they're sure as shit going to come for you for whatever reason, but they're not going to come for the illegal alien humans who are invading the country and raping your families and killing you. I get it. And even if it was just about the squirrel, yes, I understand how meme magic is supposed to work. I'm just not all that convinced it actually works. Maybe it really is the little things that go a longer way than the big things like policies and whatnot. We like to think it was meme magic that got Trump elected in 2016, but I'm not all that sure that was the case. I think it was a lot to do with how much everyone hates Hillary Clinton. And how everyone would rather eat their own pancreas raw out of their own body than vote for such an unaccountable criminal. I don't know. Seems plausible to me. Certainly more plausible than magic. And if memetics means anything, it means the control of information, the ability to manipulate narratives, to censor the truth and replace it with propaganda. And if that's some kind of supernatural force, then Google is basically a god with the power to turn a 50-50 split of undecided voters into a 90-10 split. And the mainstream media is a pantheon of undead greater demons and chaos necromancers and immortal lich kings that make our quaint internet sorcery look like, well, a bunch of nerds who are just playing D&D. The point is, it's not magic. It's assholes making your information technology run as jankily as possible. It's not witchcraft. It's glitchcraft. Just like any sufficiently advanced technology, it looks like magic to those who don't understand how it works or who are powerless to stop it. It's just ruthless liars lying so ruthlessly that it's hard for the average person to wrap their head around how anyone could lie so ruthlessly. And yet, despite this unspeakable power, it didn't work in 2016. They couldn't pull it off. By all accounts, it should have been a landslide for Trump, and the best they could do was creep up to the halfway line and then choke at the last minute. It didn't work in 2020 either. So they had to use a whole different kind of meme magic, namely voter fraud. Widespread voter fraud. I hope I'm still allowed to say that. And of course, widespread blanket censorship of those exact words, among others. But it won't work this time. This time we've broken the information hegemony of YouTube and Twitter. Now we have Rumble and X, formerly Twitter, and we won't get fooled again, because this time we're able to ascertain the truth. The truth is the antidote, the counterspell to this tempest of lies. The cute pictures of squirrels are just, seasoning, window dressing. They're the comic relief characters that we insert into our legendary epic tales. And yes, Peanut did indeed have a legendary epic tale. I'll give you that. But Harambe did not. He didn't have any kind of tale. He's a gorilla. He didn't need one. It was us getting our dicks out for him. That was the real magic. By the way, have you noticed how few fucks people give about Fred the raccoon? Poor little bugger only appears in like 5% of the memes. Everyone's going on about justice for Peanut, and Fred the raccoon is up there in heaven going, What the fuck am I? Chopped liver? Well, close. You're probably cat food. They didn't even test you for rabies. They don't care. The Karen next door needed to feed her filthy little Manx cat, so they went, here, have this guy's pet. Fuck him. And nobody gives a shit. Because raccoons aren't as cute as squirrels. They're not as neotenous or something. So if you think Peanut is some kind of omen, like Harambe was some kind of omen, well, here's your fucking omen. No matter who wins the election tonight, some of us will be mourned and pedestalized and celebrated, while some of us will be lucky if we get the scraps of compassion from the infrastructural table to which we brought everything. If you get what I'm driving at, it's like that meme of the press conference where there's a man with one microphone and a woman with like 20 microphones. Imagine that meme, but with Peanut and Fred, and then imagine it again with the woman and the man. Yeah, there you go. That's my contribution to the meme war. I don't do visual memes. I just speak them into existence because I'm lazy. Someone else do the picture. I'm tired. Oh, and if it's not too late, vote Donald Trump. He's the raccoon. Kamala Harris is the squirrel. Did you see it? Did you spot it? Did you predict the M. Night Shyamalan twist? Extra points to everyone.
What?
I'm glad we're on the same page, or at least in the same compendium of unwritten encyclopedia. I don't know what I'm saying. Leave me alone.
All right.
So J.O. Balls says Steve Leto, who I do watch some of his stuff. I actually watch a lot of his stuff, and I missed this. Apparently, he went over an article about that raid that says that they were, when they went on the raid for the squirrel, they weren't actually going after the squirrel. It was actually about going after the guy and his wife, because they have an OnlyFans, and I guess because they have an OnlyFans, the state assumed that they have child porn. Like, I'm not sure what the connection there is, because there's lots of people on OnlyFans who are adults that don't seem to do anything but display themselves. And there doesn't seem to have been any evidence that came out since then. Like, they didn't come back out later and say, look, you guys may be angry about this squirrel, but look what we found. So apparently they didn't find anything. So it may be that they weren't trying just to punish this guy for being nice to the squirrel. Maybe they were trying to punish him for being innocent of a reprehensible crime that they wanted to pin on him. Which, in my opinion, that's even worse. Like the government shows up at your house trying to find evidence to convict you of a serious crime, and when that evidence doesn't exist, they kill your pets as punishment. Like, that's pretty scary too.
All right. Yeah. Let us. I mean, at least we know that Peanut and Fred will have company in heaven with Harambe.
There we go.
You know, there you go. It started with a gorilla. It perhaps ends with a squirrel and a raccoon. I don't know how that works, but I'm not in control of these things. Okay, but anyway. We're gonna move on to the next story. Let us know what you guys think about this one in the comments. Okay, last one. We're talking about Margot Robbie. This is a small story, but I thought it was kind of interesting because Margot Robbie, you might know her as an actress. She was in a number of movies. She played Harley Quinn. She was in the Wolf of Wall Street. But her really big film is one that she personally worked on as well, called Barbie, which I have ranted about a lot because I'm just one of these weird people that can see that it's a hyper-feminist, intersectional garbage fire of a film that made a shit ton of money because it says a lot about women. And this story also says a lot about modern women. So Margot Robbie has just had a baby. So she is the face of feminism right now, the modern face of feminism. She had a baby, and it's a boy. And this is a problem for Twitter. So, feminists on Twitter are so angry about the fact that she had a boy that they're publicly wishing for harm to come to her baby. No, we're not kidding. Feminists are allegedly wishing harm on Margot Robbie's newborn son, expecting her to raise him as a girl due to her role in the film Barbie. Now, this is the thing about people who are terminally online and addicted to culture. They're probably that you see that there are people who have made, Chucky and Pennywise from horror films into LGBTQ icons and the Babadook and stuff like that. I'm not lying. Look it up yourself. This is sort of along those lines, except that the Margot Robbie having a boy as a child is being viewed as a betrayal of feminism. The gender reveal trend is causing mental health issues and toxic behavior, with women fantasizing about having girls and being devastated by having boys. The Barbie movie, if you guys don't know, essentially was a feminist magnum opus that suggested that men should have almost as many rights as women. There's a they have the online users. I'm sorry, I'm reading from a couple different sources here. Mainly use the term boy mom to imply Margot Robbie was somehow promoting or enabling harmful or misogynistic behavior in her son. Okay? There is some comments revealed misogynistic undertones, implying that Robbie was somehow failing as a mother because she has had a boy instead of a girl, and of course they're calling that misogyny. Internet and Hollywood are being criticized for perpetuating a narrative that men are toxic and women are victims, ignoring the existence of good men and toxic women, obviously. The online backlash against Margot Robbie's baby news was largely unfounded and misinformed. The criticism was based on misconceptions and undertones that some will see as actually misogynistic, hence the title of this story being Margot Robbie has a baby boy, women most affected. So anyway, so the story is essentially the person that was supposed to be the symbol of women did the awful thing of having a baby that is a male, which is interesting also because the film is anti-natalist at its core. It's all about women like not being mothers and that being a burden on them for whatever reason, but it didn't actually affect the behavior of the actress herself, who chose to get married to a man and have kids, which is usually the way that feminists operate, by the way. So while they're telling you, women, to live one way, they are actually living the way that they would normally, like in a different way, essentially. Go ahead.
I wanted to let you finish. Did you have more to say?
No, I think that's it. It's a small story, but I just think it's interesting and funny that, she, like I said, she had a baby boy and everybody's like upset about it, or feminists online are upset about it.
Yeah, I know it looks like this isn't much of a story because it's just about the reactions of the worst corner of Twitter Karens. It sort of seems like we're embodying that thing where 90% of Twitter is just imagining a guy and then getting outraged about that guy. And yes, to some extent that's a factor, but we're not making this up. These people might be rare, but they might not be, but they certainly do exist. And what it tells us is that these people have always existed. The internet didn't create these unspeakably misandric demons. Universities did. Arguably, they've existed since long before universities validated their demonic misandry. The internet simply shows us that they exist without the filter of the mainstream media that likes to paint a picture of a purely misogynistic patriarchy in which such misandric demons are merely a figment of fragile masculinity's imaginings. But there's no telling how real this is or how ubiquitous this is. For every misandric baby killer who's willing to admit this in public, there's a greater number of them who believe it but would not admit it in public. And they are quietly enacting these beliefs in their private actions. For all these horror stories we hear about China, right? How they apparently drown baby girls because they'd rather have sons. Never mind how they only do so because their sons are legally obliged to look after their parents, while their daughters are only obliged to be looked after. We don't hear the equivalent horror stories from the West. For as long as ultrasound technology has existed, so too has existed this irrational fear and hatred of male humans, down to and including male fetuses. And so too has existed abortions. Every woman has this series of opportunities. First, to prefer female offspring because they're so terrified of male offspring, and then to determine long before birth what sex of baby they are gestating, and then to abort the baby should they see fit. And how they see fit is at their own discretion. They don't even have to tell the truth. They can elect to abort the baby for any reason, disclosed or undisclosed. So yes, that series of events can take place. You find out your baby is male, and so you kill it because it is male. Don't tell me it can't happen. It clearly can. And don't tell me it doesn't happen. Many women will proclaim that it's exactly what they want to happen. You may say they're only joking, and sure, many of them probably are just joking, but the point is, they can make it happen. There's nothing stopping them. It's left only to imagining exactly how often this series of events does indeed happen. There's little or no way for us to determine how often it does happen, since such medical information is generally secret and anonymous. And if we were to take a survey of the general population to find out that it's still roughly 49% male, 51% female, we might notice that the male population is being skewed upwards because the vast majority of all these illegal aliens are male, and they're being counted on the same census. The Great Replacement, ladies and gentlemen, is not just conducted along racial lines. As long as they're killing, say, 10% of the male babies and replacing the male population with a 10% influx of illegal alien males, or whatever the ratio may be, it's very much happening along sexual lines. Indeed, the Great Replacement of males came first. It came long before the Great Replacement of races or whatever else. It was once considered a radical pipe dream to reduce the male population. Now it's very much a reality. But of course, this is just conjecture. I can't be sure of any of this. I'm just asking questions and presenting hypotheticals. On an unrelated note, if it's not too late, vote Donald Trump and see if you can make some headway into preventing this male genocide. Just an idea, throwing it out there like a butterfly in an anime-based meme. Abortion? Is this male genocide? Nah, probably not. Never mind. You're fine. This is fine. This is fine. At least I can have abortions. And so on and so forth.
So I just want to take everybody way back in time here for a minute. We're gonna go back before Honey Badger Radio. In fact, before the Honey Badger Brigade existed. So on December 16th, 2011, Robert O'Hara of A Voice for Men published on the website an article titled "Radfem Hub: The Underbelly of a Hate Movement." And the significance of this article in regard to this type of talk is, and you'll have to look at it in the Wayback Machine to actually see the images that prove this, but it showed a lot of women talking like this about men and boys. Things like, if I have a baby boy, I won't nurse him, take care of him, then and things like that. But in among those were feminist activists in position of power and authority, or in position of authority over boys, like school teachers and things like that, saying these reprehensible things and talking about ways that they undermine the welfare of the people that they were in charge of or in authority over. And so when people talk about stuff like this, as just outrage porn, like, there is such a thing as just outrage porn. This one individual woman gets hired to this company as a DEI hire. We know that happens. If you have to highlight every instance of that happening and there isn't some other connection that you can highlight, yes, that is outrage porn. This is a continuation of a discussion that has been taking place for a long time, because what you're seeing on social media with regard to these women behaving this way toward this actress, this is influenced by women in positions of power and authority. And I'm not talking about social power, just social power. I'm talking about women who are influencers of legislation, who even vote on what legislation gets passed, right? I'm talking about women who control access to education, talking about women who make decisions regarding how law or how policy in government agencies is going to be treated, right? Coordinators for cities, coordinators for departments, government departments. And then you also have people who just do jobs that seem like they're innocuous, but only until you find out they work for the state, like a web developer or a creator of media. And then you find out, yeah, they're just a creator of media that creates all the graphics for this one department, or they're just a web developer that develops the website that determines whether or not you're able to apply for grants for this one particular thing. So this isn't just a minor detail. It's actually quite serious. It's funny to see these women getting upset about this and turning into psycho hose beasts over something they have no control over. But at the same time, it's a bit scary because it's common now. Right? The girl bosses are that run parts of the machine, parts of the machine that you rage against, parts of the plant that I've been referring to, the Lovecraftian horror plant monster, right? They're doing this. They want to see baby boys being denied mother's milk because they're boys. They want to see little boys being denied education because they're boys. They want to see children being denied medical care because they're boys. So it's not just outrage porn. That's very important. And you should be paying careful attention to this and noticing how many women think it's okay to behave this way toward other people in public over their parenting choices in regard to boys. Because it is a symptom of something that is mostly under the surface, that you mostly don't see, that is very deep and dark and nasty. And while I did point out the article was written by Robert O'Hara, the information was acquired by a Voice for Men secret agent, you could say. He's not exactly that. He's a writer. He worked with us, actually, when we first started Honey Badger Radio. If you listen to any archives of our old Blog Talk radio shows, and you hear us talking to James. James was Agent Orange. Agent Orange was his code name in reporting to A Voice for Men on his finding of this information, and it's basically doxing. He went into Radfem Hub and pretended to be one of them, and quite effectively harvested quite a bit of their discussion and information that showed, who was having these discussions and what effects they were trying to create in the world, which you don't see happening a lot anymore. And of course, he did it specifically because there was this misandric influence among women in positions of power and authority that was affecting people in the real world. And he did take a risk. I mean, he could have gotten in trouble had he gotten caught doing this. So it's something that people should remember, even though, like, he's not involved in that anymore. And it's one of the reasons why, like, yes, I fully condemn doxing somebody because you don't like some stupid thing they said on Twitter. But when somebody is in a position of authority and power and they're using those positions to damage people's lives on the basis of an ideology, that's an entirely different situation. You have a right to know what your public officials are doing and if they are doing unethical and corrupt things, and if they are violating sunshine standards, even if there are not sunshine laws that apply to them, if they are violating the ethics of sunshine standards, which are basically the standard of any government engagement among any officials, anything that they do that's going to affect the public being made public instead of being done in private and secret, right? If they're doing it in violation of sunshine standards, then it is perfectly fair and reasonable for somebody to sneak in and expose that. So yeah, that's basically my response to this. Like, I don't care what these women think, and I don't care about their attitudes. I care who's having those attitudes, and that is what makes this the most serious thing. And it goes right back to the squirrel issue, right? That bit coming out, and by the way, he clarified. I can't remember who it was that said. I gotta go back here. Jay clarified it was not Steve Leto, which is why I couldn't find the video. It was Clownfish TV. In searching that, I found the article, which was a TMZ article, and it does say that sources, it doesn't say who the sources are, but sources think authorities were after porn, not animals. I think the source might actually be the family themselves. But when officials show up at your house and they ask if you have cameras, they ask if they're on camera, unless you know for a fact that you're subjected to some kind of law that says you have to tell them, don't. You just start right there invoking your right to remain silent. And let them wonder if they're being filmed. If you get officials showing it up at your house and trying to raid and you have done nothing wrong and you do have cameras, if it's possible, start publicly streaming it the minute they walk up to your door. Because this kind of stuff should not happen in secret.
Okay. Well, I'm going to read some super chats and we're going to head into the patron show because we're a little over on time. So first I got one from Albatross and he says, this is the same insane energy as women stalking Adam Driver's family because they wanted him to hook up with Ray Palpatine. Yeah, Daisy Ridley. It is that, but I think that the darker thing we talked about, it is like the normalization of this kind of like, like we've basically made abortion so normal that it's become eugenics when women call for it, and no one seems to think that that's that there's anything wrong with that, even though it is a vocal minority. But the point is,
we've made abortion so normal in the United States that women last year in the United States made being aborted the #1 cause of death here.
Right.
1 million abortions last year. 1 million.
Well, they want to get it all in before, Project 2025 comes. But yeah, like that's what I'm saying. Like the issue is the normalization, and also pointing out again, the people who push this message don't actually live that. Like Margot Robbie is having children, and she's not engaging in any of that. But I guarantee you, she is championing this for other women, just not for herself. So anyway, I gotta read. Let me get through the rest of these super chats. Thank you, Albatross. Yes, it's the same. And Nova Fan gave us a Rumble rant for I think it looks like $1, and he says, "Why do I get the feeling all the women defending Margot Robbie against angry feminists spent most of their adult lives supporting women's rights? Should we inform them of the history of women's rights?" Well, women's rights until you do something that they don't like, and then that doesn't count. I remember when was it Kirsten Dunst? Like years ago, she was the actress that was in the Spider-Man movies with Tobey Maguire. She basically said, something like, "Well, I like being a mother and a housewife," and they were just writing articles about it because essentially it's about maintaining a certain, narrative for women, and any women that stray from that, they get attacked in the same way that men having any opinion on this shit at all get attacked. So you just become like an honorary man. So, all right, but anyway. We're going to move on to the patron show now, and we're going to be talking about what's going on in the background. I have no idea. I have not been looking into it at all because I wanted to focus on just like, doing the show and all that. And but we're going to talk about it. We're going to see where we're at in terms of the election here in the United States. So if you're not American, I don't know what to tell you, but maybe you should hang out anyway, because what happens to us will affect you.
Yeah, but, I was gonna say we're headed down a path in the United States right now that makes that everybody in the world should be nervous about, because there are potential wars, and we talked about this in HBR Talk again recently. We just learned from looking at some of the information that came out about the second attempted assassin whose failure to assassinate the president was publicized. That indicates that under the Obama administration, the United States paid Afghan soldiers to commit a genocide against Russian nationals in Ukraine for the crime of rejecting a government that the United States installed there. So you should care about who is president of the United States, because that's that bureaucracy that women voted into place in action. And that bureaucracy continues unabated with Kamala. There's a slight chance, a spark of hope, that it'll be interrupted with Trump, and that interruption will continue if we continue to vote in people to interrupt it. So yeah, you should want to know what's going on.
All right. I care about the American election because the two parties have significant differences. Like, I didn't care about the last UK election or any of the recent last UK elections because every party in the UK is run by corrupt communist traitors. It doesn't matter how we vote. We've already been failed by democracy. Much like before Trump turned up in 2016. Like, it didn't matter. Like, did it matter if Al Gore won or if George Bush won or if John Kerry won or if George Bush won or if John McCain won or Barack Obama won or if Mitt Romney won or Barack Obama? It didn't matter. They were all the same fucking warhawks of the same uniparty. It didn't matter until 2016 when an outsider finally came along like Donald Trump. And that's why we give a shit, because your elections actually matter. And plus, everything that happens in the US trickles down into the rest of Europe. So this is really fucking important.
Yeah. So I'm going to read this last super chat that I missed, and then we're going to go into the patron show where we can talk about this more. So Senior Sticks gave us $2 and says, "Who's going to pay for Squirrel Gate? Hannah is hot 2024." All right. Thank you, Senior Sticks, for that. All right, we're going to end the show there. Thank you guys for coming on. If you like this video, please hit like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed, hit the bell for notifications, leave us a comment. Let us know what you guys think about what we talked about on the show today. And please, please, please share this video because sharing is caring. Thank you so much for coming on today's episode of HBR News. And we will see you next Tuesday. I mean, hopefully we're still here after tonight. Talk to you guys
Tried to kill him.
Men's rights activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have like a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.